Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Now moving on to our fifth and final fragment, which is our pointer fragment. First note to make is that when you have the pointers, such as the words hada, hadani, haulai, etc., with these words you can either have a fragment or you can actually have sentences as well. Now we're not going to focus on the sentences for now, we're going to be focusing on fragments. Now even though it's the same words being used, when you can use hada for a fragment, hada for a sentence, okay, the rules differ. So we're only going to concentrate on how the rules apply in a fragment. Now, as this is a review, I'm hoping that you guys have memorized the meanings of these words, as well as obviously memorizing the words themselves. So, hada means this, hadani means these two, haulai, these. So, one observation we can make from these two tables is that when it comes to the ones which are near, when you're pointing at something near, close to us, all of these words begin with the letter ha. Okay, often what happens is that sometimes when you're trying to translate hada, which means this, sometimes you make the mistake of translating as that, because they're both pointers. However, when it begins with the letter ha, remember that the translation will be something close, as opposed to something which is far. And those which are far, all of these words, all of the pointers will end with a kaf, as you can see, dhalika, dhanika, ulaika, etc. So going back to the first point that I mentioned in regards to pointers being used as fragments or sentences. Okay, so when is it used as a fragment? When is it used as a sentence? It's a very, very simple rule. If you see a pointer like hada, and immediately after it you have a word that has an alif lam on it, that immediately will tell you that it's a fragment. And if it's a fragment, then you can't have the word is. For example, if I say that book, that's a fragment, it's not a complete sentence. If I say that is a book, then that becomes a sentence. If I have to add the word is, it becomes a sentence. So pointers plus al equals fragment, and therefore no is. So that's what we're going to be looking at, and make a list of a few things which I need to mention. Okay. So let's look at what I've written here. Hada al-kitabu, together, hada al-kitabu. Hada is the pointer. Al-kitabu has alif lam on it, so therefore we translate it as this book. Now, how do we label this in Arabic? In English we call it a pointer, but what is a pointer in Arabic? How do we term that? We label it as Ismul Ishaarah. So the word hada, we label it as Ismul Ishaarah. Okay? And the thing being pointed at, which is al-kitabu, we call it the Mushaarun Ilayh. Okay, so it's important. It's not something very difficult to remember. The more examples you do, go through the list of them, and just remember Ismul Ishaarah, Mushaarun Ilayh. It's important. It will help you in the long run in how to deal with this fragment. So just remember that the pointers themselves are called Ismul Ishaarah, and the word being pointed at, or the thing being pointed at, is called the Mushaarun Ilayh. So just a few notes on these. So firstly, the labeling. How do we label these? Ismul Ishaarah, Mushaarun Ilayh are the technical terms that we use. And what other pointers are there? If you look at the chart itself, you'll notice how all of these words are non-flexible. Meaning hada will be hada in rafa, hada in nasb, hada in jar, as you can see. Okay, so all of these are non-flexible except for the pairs. Hadani will become hadaini, hatani will become hataini, dhanika will become dhainika, dhanika will become dhainika. And if you think back to the Muslimun chart, when it comes to Arabic words, anything in pair, like Muslimani, it will be in rafa, Muslimaini would be nasab and jar. So ani will always be rafa, aini will always be nasab or jar when it comes to two of something in Arabic. Okay, so the second pointer is all non-flexible except pairs. Okay, so that's another observation that we made. Point number three is that all of these are proper. If you go to remember the list of 7 types of proper, pointers is amongst that list. Pointers, pronouns, etc. Another point which I mentioned at the beginning is that with pointers you can either have a fragment or a sentence. Okay, so sentences we're going to look at later, as I mentioned. Fragment is, remember, pointer plus al equals a fragment. And the final point on the Ismul Ishaarah, Mushaarun Ilayh, is that something which, when you're referring to something which is a broken plural, which I'll give an example of, then you can actually use hadihi and tilka. Now I'll explain that in a moment. So هذه and tilka could be referring to a broken plural or non-human plural. If you think back to the rule of number that we done, is that all non-human broken plurals can be treated singular feminine, and also non-human plurals are also treated singular feminine. This actually happens in the Quran as well. The third juz of the Quran, Allah says, tilka ar-rusul. We have the word tilka, which is a pointer. Immediately it's followed by an alif lam. So here we have a pointer fragment. Pointer plus al is a fragment, and no is in between. So what does tilka mean? If you look back at the list, tilka on its own, we would say the translation is that. Tilka means that. That's the singular feminine version of that. If you have a look, so dhalika is that, which is singular. That tilka is also that, but referring to something which is feminine. Now let's look at that again. Rusulu, rusulu means messengers, messengers. Now remember, when you have a plural word, we have to look whether it's a normal plural or it's a broken plural. Now ar-rusulu is clearly a broken plural, okay, because it doesn't have una, ina, it doesn't have atun, atin. So ar-rusulu, which means messengers, is a human broken plural. And if you remember the rule of human broken plurals, it always has two answers. It's either going to be treated grammatically as singular feminine, or as the translation suggests. Now ar-rusulu, therefore, we could say it's plural masculine if you go with the meaning. However, the crazy Arabic rule is that it could also be treated as singular feminine. So how does this apply over here? It's that if ar-rusulu could be treated singular feminine, then that means we can actually also use the singular feminine version of the pointer as well. So tilka is singular, tilka is also feminine. So we can say tilka rusulu. Okay, so therefore the fragments of tilka and ar-rusulu, they match. Okay, and that's the sixth and final point on this, is that the pointer plus the pointed at, which is the Mushaarun Ilayh, okay, has to follow the same four properties. Okay, so pointer plus the pointed at has to follow the same four properties. So whatever the four properties of ar-rusulu is, tilka will follow in the same four properties. Now notice, as we mentioned, that the pointers are all non-flexible, except for the pairs. So you can never ever tell what status the pointer is unless you look at the Mushaarun Ilayh. Okay, so because ar-rusulu is rafa, tilka is rafa. Because ar-rusulu is singular feminine grammatically, okay, and tilka is also singular feminine. Okay, ar-rusulu is also is proper, so tilka will be proper, and tilka is also going to be proper because it's in the list of one of the 7 types of proper. Now thinking back at that, because ar-rusulu is a human broken plural, it could also be treated as the translation suggests, which would be plural masculine. Now if we wanted to, we could also use the plural masculine version of the pointer as well, which would be ulaika. Ulaika. Okay, and the translation of that again would be those messengers. Those messengers. Okay. Now even with the word tilka, on its own, the meaning of tilka is that. However, if we can't really translate that in English like that, because we can't say that messengers, we would say those messengers. Okay, so even though tilka usually means that, but in English it wouldn't make sense to say that messengers, we would also translate the tilka as those messengers. Okay, so this kind of get a bit complicated, but if you go through all the examples, you know, in your textbooks, inshallah, you know, you'll get the hang of it. It's just a matter of practicing this, and you know, before you know it, you'll know it, inshallah. Okay, jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.